Hi and welcome to Expecto First Steps. This is the second video in the series of intro videos to Expecto. And in this video we're going to go through how to get started with Expecto. So initially we're going to create a new project using a template. Let's start by going and typing .NET new-i expecto.template : And then there are also quotes around Expecto template, and that's because in some terminals, if you do star at all, then you basically glob all the files in the current directory, which won't match anything and make the command a no-op. We'll then create a folder called First Steps, and then write the first step, and then write your first test. So without further ado, let's have a look. Alright, so we're currently in the demo folder, and in this one we'll be doing this one, new template -i expecto.template : And what this does is that it looks up the nugget for Expecto templates. Right. And now what we want to do is to do a new Expecto, like we were able to find here, and say that it has first steps as the name and then -o as the output folder. Now let's have a look at what this folder contains. It has an fsproy file, a main file, and a sample file. On .NET you got the fsproy as the main build file, and what it does is that it lists all the fs files in order, the order that you're going to give to the compiler. Alright, so let's open this up in Writer. Alright, now we've opened it in Writer. Let's have a look at the main file. What we got here is an open Expecto, which then opens a module, and or rather a namespace, and then there's a module called tests here, which has a function called run tests in assembly. This function takes as its input the default config, which comes from this namespace, as well as the list of arguments that you get passed on your command line. And the argv here is a string array, and run test in assembly is a function that takes this implementation.expecto-config value and the parsed arguments. You'll also find that there are other nice functions in here, all starting with run, and they're all returning an int, and the int is so that the main function returns an int, and if it's a 0 it means it's successful, and if it's not a 0 it means it's unsuccessful. So other interesting functions here could be with cancel, for example, if you want to be able to cancel the test run based on something else than Control-C, or you might be interested in just plain run tests, which doesn't take in assembly, so it doesn't use something called reflection. It doesn't look at your compiled binary, so to speak, but instead you pass it the test values, and we might dive deeper into that later, but anyhow, this is the default and the normal way of doing it. Now let's have a look at the sample. So this is just filled with examples from the template, something asserting it's true here. You can see this is done using the default style where you pass arguments, and you have to remember the order of the arguments, like here for example, which is the expected and which is the actual, which are then names of the variables you expect in your expect functions. That makes sense. So when I start a new project, instead of doing that, I normally do open expecto.flip. And this gives me a much nicer API. So what I'm going to do here is delete everything inside. Alright, so now that we have the test list, what we want to do is to create a sample test which does a calculation. We do that by passing test list, both a name and a list of tests. And these are functions. So what we're doing here is that we're building up values to the module variable called tests. And we want to do, let's call the test list math, and this one a simple calculation with a test saying expect equal should be 2, right? So what's going on here? This is actually equivalent to this. So the way I use the syntax here is just a way to say whenever you indent code after this function, it's a part of this value, this function callback. So now that we have 2 tests, let's try and run this, and meanwhile let's create a failing test. So I'm just duplicating the code while this is compiling. And then I'm changing the input so that the test is failing instead. So first, let's see what the first compilation turns out like. We should get 2 passing, these 2. And now let's save and run again to get the third one. Okay, so now we've got 2 passing and 1 failing, which is exactly what we want. And you can see that the expected value is 2 and the actual value is 3. Something which can be useful if you start to create a lot of these tests in different files is to do a test label, which is then common to your project. You could do, for example, first steps as the test label. That means that you can filter out things easier when you run Expecto later, when you want to focus on particular tests. Okay, so that concludes the introduction. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and the next videos will be released when we get 4 sponsors on my GitHub. More details about that in the video description. Thank you for watching. Bye. It's now evening in the Swedish archipelago. We're at a small island called Ormskär, which stands for Snake Island, or Tiny Snake Island. It's not that tiny, but it's very cozy. So, I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Till next time.